In Kenya also reading its budget today, but our focus today is on the Kenyan budget. So let me bring in my colleague Jeff Kirui and our senior political affairs reporter who's at the parliamentary buildings for today's event. Jeff Kirui, good morning. Kindly bring us up to date with the latest information that you have from parliament buildings.
Well, a very good morning, Brenda. Indeed, as we focus on the budget, there is that simmering standoff between the members of parliament and the Minister for Treasury, that is Ambassador Ukuri, regarding the Constituency Development Fund arrears, which they say they have not been submitted to the members of parliament, or rather the CDF office, for them to disburse the money to the constituencies. And right now is Member of Parliament Aldai constituency, as well as the member of the CDF committee in Parliament. He's one of the members actually who had raised that storm in Parliament, saying that they're going to disrupt the budget reading process if that money is not in the accounts by close of business Wednesday night. And right now he's going to tell us, Mheshimiwa, welcome to KTN News. Have you managed to get that money?
Yes, as we talk, we have received 4.5 billion. We are to receive yet about 3 billion today, between today and tomorrow. I think we are encouraged by what the CS is doing to make sure that the funds which are actually entitled to these constituencies are released. As a member of the committee, I understand very well the challenges that the constituencies are going through. We've received allocation for this financial year, less 13.9 billion shillings, which came from arrears that accumulated from last financial year. You know, I felt it was not fair that we are discussing the new financial year, yet we had an arrears totaling 13 billion shillings. You know, the other day I felt so sad that the CS education, Honorable Makoha, telling the principals to chase the children away from schools, those who are not paying school fees. At the same time, the same government has not released the bursaries to enable the children to go to school. So in my view, I felt that the only language that any government anywhere is protest. And that's what I said in the House, that we are going to protest that if the government does not agree with us that they release the funds, then there will be no budget reading this afternoon. But I'm happy that some funds have been released. There is a lot of discussions. I've also got an opportunity to talk to the CS. He has agreed that he is going to release the entire amount by 15th of this month. So I'm happy that we are where we are, and I hope going forward we will not have this situation whereby we have to make demands to be given what is entitled to us.
The arrears are not just for the financial year of 2020-2021, but dates back to 2011-2012 financial year. How do you propose to canvass to have that money released and, of course, disbursed to the constituency?
It is true that we have about 4.9 billion shillings, which has not been captured in the last supplementary budget that we had proposed. The CS Treasury felt that there were some audit issues that touches on those funds. But I was telling the CS that you cannot have audit issues on the money that has not been released. You know, that money has not been released to constituencies so that you can have an audit issue, you know, unless you are trying to dodge and not to release the funds to the constituencies so that our children can benefit from this money. He has no option. You know, we are telling the CS, you have no option. The money that is entitled to these constituencies must be released. But I'm happy that the funds that were meant for the constituencies in the last financial year, that totaling about 13.9 billion shillings, as there is now a formula of releasing those funds. And half of it has been released as we talk. Last evening, the CS did its best to make sure that the funds are released. I got an opportunity to engage him yesterday, and he has agreed that by Monday, before today and Monday, is going to release another 3 billion shillings, and by 15th, it will be done with the remaining funds. But we are going to discuss, make sure that the 4.9 billion shillings, which is pending from other financial years, are released unconditionally. Yeah.
Well, Brenda, there you have it. That is an assurance from the Member of Parliament that there will be no disruption in the budget reading process today, as had earlier on been indicated by Members of Parliament who are agitating to have the Constituency Development Fund released to them. But as it stands now, it appears the coast is clear, and we're waiting for that budget reading process, which will kick off as from 2:30 p.m. when Parliament convenes for its session on this particular day of reading the budget for 2021-2022 financial year, the second last budget before the term of the current president and the current regime comes to an end. Brenda.
Right, Jeff Kirui, thank you so much indeed. And now Kenyans are having a sigh of relief after members of parliament got their money for the CDF fund, so they won't disrupt today's session of the budget reading. Jeff Kirui, thank you so much, and we'll be getting back to you later on. But let's come back to a studio and have the discussion about the budget legacy. And you know, this year's budget has been dubbed as Building Back Better Days. Are we really building back better days with this 3.63 trillion shillings budget of the country? So joining me in studio is Dr. Julian Roa, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Schedules Consulting. We can also refer to him as the Doctor of Business Administration. And thank you so much, Dr. for joining us here on KTN News Center this morning. So it is a delicate balance for the CS, Ukur Yetani, you know, as they read the budget today for the country, balancing between having a budget that is mwananchi friendly and also having a budget that's going to be focusing on the president's legacy. And majority, or you know, a high percentage of that budget has been, the funds have been directed towards development projects, big projects that the president wants to implement before his term ends next year. Dr.
Right. There's a focus clearly on investment on infrastructural projects. And then the question comes, what about Mwananchi? Because this comes at a cost to Mwananchi. It's really a delicate balance. And if I was in President Uhuru Kenyatta's shoes, I can just understand, or try and understand the pain that he must be going through. Now, it depends on the view we take. Are we taking a short-term view in our planning, or are we taking a long-term view in our planning? I think the philosophy the government has taken is long-term, which says let's invest in infrastructural projects, so much so that someday in the future we can begin to reap the benefits that come from it. Now, if that is the strategy, then I fully buy it. But then the question becomes, we've had several challenges in the recent years. For example, our borrowing has gone beyond our capacity, I would imagine, to pay. And we have really strained and stressed our people where taxation and tax collection is concerned. Not to mention again that COVID happened just sometimes last year, and we are still going through the process of recovery from COVID. Now, when you look at that, you would have expected that in the government's wisdom, they would have changed part of those plans so that they're accommodating of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Instead, what do we see? We see a push of a budget from 2.2 trillion, I think, this current financial year.
It is actually 2.8 trillion shillings.
Yeah.
And you know, which begs the question Doc was about to ask you. Every year, you know, the budget for the year 2019-2020 was about 1 trillion. And then we came to 2020-21, we were at 2.8 trillion. Now, 2021-2022, we're talking about a budget of 3.6, one of the largest budgets in our history. Why is it that every year our budget keeps on going up?
And Brenda, there's nothing wrong with that. That's an indication of ambition. We are ambitious. Somebody talked about moving us to the middle income bracket. There has to be something has to give if we are to get where we want to be in terms of development. So I would not fault the government for increasingly, deviating by a certain percentage in terms of budget provision and budget planning. So that to me is not the issue. However, if you look at the budget, which I believe has 4 steps, step number one is the preparation. We do very well in preparing for our budget. Step 2 is obtaining authorization. And I believe the presentation that's going to happen later today in Parliament is towards getting authorization from Parliament for the executive to proceed with the plans that they've set themselves. Then stage 3 of the budget is execution. And stage 4, the final one, is accountability. So Brenda, I'd like to say here categorically that where preparation is concerned, where authorization is concerned, we have scored an A+. Query must be raised on how we have done on the aspect of execution and accountability.
All right.
Which, if you ask me honestly, I think we are struggling around D plus and C minus.
D plus and C minus in terms of accountability.
Exactly.
You know, which reminds me about the president's statement this year when he said the country loses about 2 billion shillings daily. So you can imagine if you do that 2 billion times 360 days in a year, that figure is enough to fund this budget.
Then there's no deficit to talk about because we have resources. So that clearly vindicates the argument I made earlier. We are very wasteful as a country. If we fix our politics, if we fix matters management, this should not be a problem. I want to be a Kenyan who is happy to pay tax, but I want to see that it is properly executed on and it is properly accounted for.
Right.
So there's a lot of waste, and to your example, the 2 billion that the president admitted to is cause for concern.
All right. And you know, the president is keen on leaving an impressive legacy. And this is some of the two things in terms of impressive legacy when it comes to his leadership style. And you know, a united country that he's been talking about, but of more importance is in terms of the big projects. And this, you know, these two are things that the budget is likely to be hinged on. Not even it's likely, it will be hinged on. But then if the country, as we look at it right now in terms of economic stability, we are not able to fund the budget as a country in terms of these big projects that the president is talking about. Hence, we're relying on foreign borrowing, and this means the country will have more debt year in, year out at the expense of the common mwananchi.
Yatani, CS, admitted yesterday, and I believe that was a clip run by your esteemed station. He said we're in an environment where revenues are reduced and the expenditures have expanded. Debt has increased. So if you look at that particular situation that we find ourselves, there's a big puzzle there. There's a big puzzle. Meanwhile, we are very ambitious about what we want to achieve 2021-2022 financial year. There's something about that equation that is not right. Now, there's talk about, expanding the tax bracket so that many people can actually, come on the table and meet the obligations as well. I see that as the best bet in funding this budget that is very, very ambitious. It is my considered view that we are about 40% wasteful in the taxes that we can generate or we can collect. There are many people who are still avoiding tax or evading tax. If the economy can be digitized in such a way that we have information on everybody and the activities and the revenues that they generate, I can assure you that 40%, which I believe is what we are wasting, can actually be recouped and be made use of in our planning going forward. But again, do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the systems that can enable that to happen effectively? I have my doubts. So what will most likely happen again is we'll see an increase in taxation to the same Kenyans who are already being taxed. And then that talks to another bigger burden in an environment where we can see loans are not properly performing. Bank loans are not properly performing. We've seen a provision of about 1.63 trillion in possible bad loans.